Well, John Solomon is the Executive Vice President at The Hill, and he joins us now for more. John, good to have you.
Good to be here.
John, what do you make of all this talk of impeachment?
You know, it's a moment of catharsis for the Democrats. They waited 2 years for the Mueller report. Didn't turn out the way they thought it would. And I think they need to rally their base. Remember, a lot of people are raising money right now. There's about 22, 23 candidates in the 2020 primaries. So it's a good fundraising thing. It's a good rally the base. At the end of the day, I take Nancy Pelosi at her words when she says, I don't think we're going to go there. That's what God made elections for. And I think at the end of the day, this is more about electioneering than it is about the progress of an impeachment investigation.
John, President Trump says that he's ready to take this issue to the Supreme Court. Some question if that's even possible, given that that's the prerogative of Congress. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, looking at the legality, it's a tricky case. Now, good lawyers usually can find any reason to get to before the court, a loophole or something. I don't think it gets there, though. I really don't. I mean, I think there could be some battles over executive privilege. I think the president may invoke executive privilege. The Democrats in Congress will challenge that, and there may end up in court there. I don't think a case over impeachment will reach the courts at this point.
Okay. Yeah, you know, the House, of course, has the votes to impeach the president, but with a Republican-controlled Senate, it is very unlikely that they would convict him. John, you know, is President Trump getting out ahead of his skis here by even bringing up the Supreme Court?
You know, I think the president saw what the last 2 years was like, right? He passively sat there and, for the most part, cooperated with investigation and got bombarded. I think you're seeing him on a more offensive strategy, which is getting ahead of any move by the Democrats and letting them know, you want to fight, it's going to be a real fight this time. And I think that that's going to be the strategy heading into the 2020 election. You're going to see a more assertive president. And if you're the Democrats, you might want to watch. I think this president's going to start to release information about the other party. He's seen enough released on him. Keep an eye on that dynamic. I think you're going to see an effort at transparency that may put the Democrats on defensive.
John, to the other investigations Democrats are pursuing, President Trump is trying to block their efforts denying witnesses to testify on Capitol Hill,
right,
also withholding his tax returns or any other documents that he wants to keep private. By not cooperating, does he, in a roundabout way, make a stronger case for impeachment for the Democrats?
Listen, there's a dynamic in the American people. We always expect our president to be transparent. It's one of the things that comes with the job, whether we like it or not. This feels like an opening negotiation for me, right? The president's going to put down a hard line. I'm not cooperating at all, and maybe they'll come to the table and reach some agreement. If you take the president and the way he conducted himself during the Mueller investigation, you have an enormous amount of cooperation, 1.5 million documents, a waiver of all of his privileges, his attorney-client privilege, his executive privilege. He's a president that has a history of cooperating. Now we need to see what sort of deal he'll strike with the Democrats on cooperating. At some point, I think there'll be a deal to get some insight into these issues.
Yeah, and there's talk that this also buys him time. This slow rolls any investigations to really kind of put Democrats in a tough position.
Yeah, and I think the president thinks that, I think if you look at the polling data, people are a little bit tired of the investigations. They've had enough. They've heard it for 2 years. I think there's a moment where America wants to suck in some fresh air and start on some other topics. Also, you saw the president meeting with Nancy Pelosi. There's a dynamic going on in trying to get other things done, like in infrastructure. There's legislation we need to move the country forward. And sometimes by holding these investigations at bay, you can get some of that other work done. So I think it's a two-track approach, immigration and infrastructure being important to the president as policy items. And all right, yeah, Jerry Nadler's going to be there today, and he's going to be there 6 months from now. And I think he's trying to balance that equilibrium.
And John, in your latest piece, you write that the winner of the Robert Mueller sweepstakes, as you call it, is not President Trump, is not the Democrats, it's Vladimir Putin. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's funny. Deep in the story, there are some pretty important intelligence voices, one of them being the former CIA station chief for Moscow. If anyone understands Russian spy tradecraft, it's the guy that used to be our station chief in Moscow. He says when we look back at the evidence now and you read everything from Mueller, he has a complete different interpretation of what went on in 2016. So Obama left this narrative when he left office. President Obama left us a narrative that Putin tried to swing the election, get Donald Trump elected, and then defeat Hillary Clinton. There's clear evidence the Russians hacked Hillary Clinton's emails and the DNC. The assessment about whether they were really trying to help Hillary Clinton has always been in doubt. In fact, I think the NSA spy chief once testified, at best, he had medium or mediocre confidence in that conclusion. What experts are now saying is when we look at the whole thing, it looks like the Trump Tower meeting, maybe the stuff that was being fed to Glenn Simpson, was what is known in the spy tradecraft as discoverable influence operations, meaning Vladimir Putin intended for these things to be found so that the American public would be in a tizzy about it. A very interesting thing, but if you look at his philosophy or his underpinnings for this, All right, they sent a lawyer to the Trump Tower who was declared as a Russian lawyer in the country only by the graces of the Justice Department, who gave her a special visa. If you were trying to do a secret handshake with the president to hijack the election, would you send someone who was that identified and monitored? You wouldn't. Same thing about if you take a look at who Christopher Steele's alleged source was. It's a former Russian intelligence source. Would you really use that person for secret clandestine communications? I just don't think that's it. So I think there's a rethinking going on among intelligence professionals. And if that happens, Vladimir Putin's already won because he has us doubting for another 6 months in our democracy.
John, as you just pointed out, it's clear that Russia did meddle in the 2016 elections. But because it was all thrown in with the Mueller investigation, it seems as though it makes it harder for the president to accept the findings. Is that a loss for us as we head into 2020, knowing that the Russians probably want to disrupt again?
You know, I think you have to take the president on two levels, what he tweets and says sometimes, and then what he actually does as president. If you take a look at the sanctions he's issued against Russia, they're far more sweeping than anything Barack Obama did. And keep in mind, Barack Obama had 7 months warning that these things had happened and didn't do anything. He's also, if you take a look at the way the Homeland Security Department and Justice Department dealt with states in 2018 during the election, far more proactive communication, warnings. The second of any sort of hacking attempt, everybody gets alerted. That didn't happen in 2016. So in his actions, the president has been fairly assertive on making sure that we don't have hijacking of an election through hacking and other things. In his own thing, he's trying to defend himself, and it's a little more nebulous to the American public, I think.
And John, looking at the 2020 Democrats, Joe Biden expected to announce his bid tomorrow. It keeps getting pushed back and pushed back. What does this say, and does it hurt his chances for fundraising?
You know, I don't. I think he'll be able to raise plenty of money. He's the heir of the Obama era, you know, the former vice president. He had a great following in the Senate. He's very likable. The base, particularly establishment Democrats, maybe not the far left wing, but the establishment Democrats will certainly raise money. I see some fundraisers already scheduled in Hollywood. I don't think it'll hurt himself in Hollywood. I think what he's really trying to gauge is, can I win this primary with how far the party has moved to the left? You know, we're talking about, the other day there was a town hall and we were talking about giving voting rights back to a terrorist, right? And that's how far the party's moved. That's not the Joe Biden of the last 35 years in his record. And I think he has to figure, where do I fit in this paradigm and can I win it? And I think that's all that's going on behind the scenes. I would expect him in.
We only have about a half minute left. You just heard at the beginning of our show, Abby Robertson report on Medicare for All by the Democrats. Does the president put Republicans at a disadvantage by holding off releasing the GOP plan until after the election?
It's a great question. I think, listen, every polling we've done at the Hill has shown that people want a Republican plan as an alternative to this. I think at some point the Republicans are going to come up with a plan. I bet you it will occur before the election. Maybe not the president's plan, but something general that Republicans could rally around.
Alternative of some sort.
Yeah.
John Solomon, thank you so much for being here.